Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our annual financial aid presentation. I know that this process of the presentation can be quite cumbersome to families, especially if you are the first child to go through the process out of your family. We hope that the information that you will hear from our presentation will be informative and help provide additional assistance. But as always, if you have additional questions, feel free to come down to the College and Career Center. You can schedule an appointment with one of our ISAC rep members. Certainly the college admissions folk on the other side and financial aid is a plethora of information. So feel free to reach out and ask them your questions. We are excited to have our keynote speaker with us tonight. I'll introduce her in just a moment. So you will notice there are two of us on the screen as you are viewing this presentation. This is a list of our counselors by Alpha Slice, and I know the juniors and seniors have a different Alpha Slice breakdown. So this is a list of our senior Alpha Slice. By all means, if you're a junior family watching, you would have a different Alpha Slice that you can view on our website under the guidance counselor page. Mrs. Hartley is our Eau Claine post-secondary counselor, and I am Mrs. McGann, the Almond post-secondary counselor. We do have an Instagram page account, so you're welcome to follow us. It's just at WTHS. We also have a Facebook page where we cross-post to. So we use that as a platform to remind you about events that we have coming up, college visits, other events in the Chicagoland area. So if you are on social media, you're welcome to follow us. We also have a Canvas course that we do post reminders and announcements as well. So if you haven't yet, students, you're welcome to accept our course. It's just called College and Career Counselors. We do have this year a new ISAC course specialist. His name is Alexis Alvarez, and ISAC is the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. They are the gurus for everything under the sun about financial aid, not just at the state, but also the federal level. So certainly there's his contact information and how to schedule an online appointment. Unfortunately, he is our only representative for the CLC district. So basically all the schools in Lake County he is a part of. So it's going to be very hard to schedule an appointment. That's why we listed the text the experts line or the call center or an email if you're looking for that additional support. But by all means, you can start with Warren, and then if we need to refer you on, we certainly will. So starting last year for the class of 2021, if you didn't hear already, the state of Illinois passed Public Act 101-0180. It's basically a mandate that requires all students that graduate from a public high school to either file a FAFSA, file an Illinois alternative application. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight, but basically students would do one or the other, or submit a waiver. And generally speaking, we recommend that all families do file a FAFSA. There's typically more benefits than harm. So it's to the advantage of the student, especially to receive consideration for certain scholarships and to not miss out on any need-based aid, even if they don't think you'll qualify for aid. But if your family is adamant and you do not want to do a FAFSA, that's totally up to you. There will be waivers that we'll be emailing out, and that you would just submit that back to your school counselor, and we will keep track of any and all students that we need to get that mandate completed in order to graduate from Warren. The waiver you have to be 18 years or older. So if you're a student and you choose not to file a FAFSA, technically you can be 18, or a parent or guardian has to sign it if you are not 18 years old. So we have a couple of events coming up here. The FAFSA, which you'll hear tonight, launches October 1st, and we have several FAFSA completion workshops that we will be offering to families at night. We will send out information via email of how to sign up for time slots. It will be in person in the College and Career Center. The first one's coming up October 7th. Then we have Thursday, October 14th from 4 to 6 p.m. because that is the same night as our CLC College Fair at CLC for the Illinois Regional College Fair. And then also Thursday, October 21st. But certainly you can always email myself or your counselor to schedule a family appointment to work through that, or you can schedule it with Mr. Alvarez or a member of ISAC. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but most of the colleges will recommend that you file your financial aid application by Thanksgiving. December 1st is a good target date to make sure you're in full qualification for any need-based financial aid. We have some additional scholarships. Obviously, financial aid is not just grants and loans, there are scholarships. So nationally, there are many different scholarships available. So we'll talk about those during the A portion of your lunch on December 3rd in the College and Career Center for all of these workshops. February 11th, that is our annual local Warren Scholarship Workshop, where we talk about our scholarships that are unique to Warren High School, open to seniors only. And then also for those students thinking about enrolling in the College of Lake County, March 24th, we will have our CLC Scholarships Workshop, all again in the College and Career Center. So I just wanted to point out where you can locate the local scholarships. Any scholarship that comes across our desk, they're housed in Maya Learning. So in order to access them, you would log into your Maya Learning account. On the left-hand side, you'll click on universities, and then you'll click on scholarships, and then local scholarships. And that's where you'll see all of the list. And there will be many more added, especially after winter break, January, February for sure. You will start to see more and more that you can apply for. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Miss Nelson. She is our keynote speaker from Xavier University. We're very excited to have her speak. She spoke at our financial aid night for many, many years and is a plethora of information, both not only as a regional recruitment director for Xavier, but also she is the parent of a sophomore in college. So she can give more of that parent perspective as well. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing so Julie can switch over and share when she's ready. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Mrs. McGann, and everyone at Warren for having me back. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What I want to do today is just to fill in maybe some of the knowledge gaps, but certainly to walk you through not only some of the verbiage you'll find as you look at the financial assistance process, but also the process itself. And then just a touch of what's going to happen once you actually hit submit on those forms and the colleges themselves receive that information. So I'm going to try and boil it down to its smallest parts. Certainly though, everyone's family is a little bit different. The nuances are a little bit different. So by all means, this is a time to, take some good notes, but if you've got some specific questions, obviously your ISAC rep is a great resource, or the folks at the colleges or universities to which your students are applying are going to be amazing resources. So as we get started here, let me make sure I'm doing things correctly. I just want to give you a little bit of a philosophy behind where I'm coming from in terms of paying for college. This is my 29th year doing college admissions. This is my 14th year at Xavier. And like Mrs. McGann said, I have a sophomore in college. So not only have I helped thousands of families through this process, I'm in the thick of it myself. And so when you think about paying for college, I really look at college as an investment in a student's future. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to buy this really expensive thing. It's in order for my student to become who they are supposed to be. This is one way for them to get there. So just like with any other investment, you should really be doing a cost benefit analysis. What am I getting for what am I paying? And a lot of that, you are already in the thick of this. If you are doing some college research, if your student has already started applying to colleges, you've already done that cost benefit analysis to say, where are those places where my student will fit best? Whether that's academically or socially or financially, or quite frankly, it should be all three. So you're doing that homework already. The next piece, as you're looking at paying for college, is how do we make this affordable? Most places are not going to say, okay, just bring that giant golf check in on day one and you're square. Certainly they're going to assist, and we're going to talk about how that process works with grants and loans and scholarships and work study and all those kinds of forms of aid. But then there'll also be things like payment plans where you can further break down those costs so that it's not just one gigantic cost up front, but really spread out over the entire semester. And then finally, understanding that every family's got a different threshold when it comes to debt and how much student debt they want to take on. For some families, that's zero. For other families, they say, this is the way we're going to pay for college. But I think it's also really prudent as you go through this process to think about, okay, This isn't just about getting through this year or the next year or the next 4 years. It's how do we leverage some of that future earnings that your student's going to make, after they've graduated from college and have that first job and into that first career, to really say, let's find that balance there as well. So just a little philosophy as we get into this. The other caveat, I guess, or the other thing that I want you to keep in mind is this is not a presentation about how you can pay $0 for college. I wish it were. If I knew some secret where, everybody could go to college for free, rock on, I would be doing this presentation as often as I could. But really it is a partnership between families and the schools themselves to say, we understand that everybody's got a little bit of skin in the game. The responsibility is coming from the families, but certainly the colleges and universities themselves are helping out as well. So just a little bit of homework as you start this, particularly for my senior families, but if you have students who are juniors or sophomores or freshmen that you want to start having this conversation about college and what it really will cost. You don't have to open your checkbook and say, here's what we've got. But I think everybody, again, every family is a little different and is going to have different expectations about where that money is going to come from. So to simply start the conversation by saying, hey, we've planned a little bit for college. We have this much saved up. We have nothing saved up. We have millions of dollars saved up. Wherever that lands for your family, that's where it lands. And I think bringing your student into that conversation right away is really helpful because then everyone is on the same page. I think also too, kind of talking about, okay, this is what our day-to-day looks like. This is how we're going to budget this cost of college into it. And also explaining to your student, to your child, hey, we can help this much. You are also going to be responsible for a portion of this too, whether that's through taking student loans or, if you're working a summer job and some of those dollars are going to go to pay for college. Either way, really to bring everybody into that. And then also kind of giving that conversation a moment to talk about debt and what does that look like, and how that's going to affect their future. So a little bit of homework, but I think it's good to get everybody on the same page from a money standpoint, because certainly it's a lot more fun to talk about, here's what I want to major in, or here's the residence halls that I want to live in, or here's the activity that I want to do when I get to college. But you got to pay for it too. So have that conversation early and often. All right, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of the process. How does this work? How do you get started in the financial aid process? Mrs. McGann talked a little bit about Public Act 101-0180. So certainly the expectation is that you would either file the FAFSA or the alternative application or the waiver. Know this, I think a lot of families sometimes automatically think, hey, we're not going to qualify for aid, so why should we file a FAFSA? If you go to the website where you can find that waiver, actually the waiver itself has got some great questions on it that are often asked by families. Know that the FAFSA is your student's application for federal loan dollars as well. So if the loan is part of your process of paying for college, that is how you acquire those federal loan funds. So that might be a reason enough to file the FAFSA, but if that's not, part of your consideration, then certainly you don't need to file that. And just, if you had some questions, what is this alternative application? This really allows students in Illinois who are undocumented or transgender, who might not already be able to file the FAFSA, to kind of unlock the door to any kind of state, federal, or state financial assistance. So this is just a way to help more students have more access to college. Okay, so let's turn the calendar ahead about 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks anymore, about 2 weeks, to October 1st of 2021. If you have a senior this is the first time you can file the FAFSA, or the free application for federal student aid. If you do not have a senior, just extrapolate forward to October 1st of the fall of your student senior year. So whether that's 2022 or beyond. Some schools may request that you fill out something specifically for them. There may be some sort of institutional financial aid form. Other schools may ask that you file the CSS profile, which is a little more in depth. You can find that on the College Board website. Those are some special cases. Not everyone is going to ask for one or the other, but the vast majority of schools will ask you to file that FAFSA, or that free application for federal student aid. And you can find that at fafsa.gov. Please note that it's .gov. The first F in FAFSA stands for free. So if you are filling out this form and you get to the end and it asks for a credit card number so that they can charge you, $79.95 for the privilege of filing a FAFSA, you're in the wrong site. So my idea was they should have a tagline, and this is what I think it should be: if it's not free, it's not FAFSA. Okay, maybe not, but you get the point. Keep that in your head. Do not pay anybody to help to do the FAFSA, for sure. So why are you filing this document? Why are you filling in all these blanks? Well, for two reasons. One, we want to collect your financial data, of course, but also some demographic information. And then we use, or the federal government uses, that information to calculate a student aid index, or an SAI. If you have older children, you might remember the EFC. The Department of Ed said, hey, guess what? We're going to change the name of this because it really is a better moniker for what this number is. So what is this SAI, or student aid index? Well, by getting this index number, each school to which your student has been admitted or will be admitted can then determine what kind of a financial aid package to create. It is probably not what you're actually going to pay out of pocket. So your student aid index is going to be most likely a positive integer. So if it was 5,000, that doesn't mean that you pay 5,000 for college. It just means that the school will use that 5,000 as an index to say, how can we best create a package of financial assistance to help make our school affordable for this family. It's also a trigger to the financial aid offices at every school to say, will this family be eligible for federal or for state financial assistance? Because there are some thresholds based on that SAI to determine who gets those forms of aid. Okay, so October 1st, FAFSA.gov, go ahead, fill out that form. Make sure when you do so that you are using the FAFSA for the 2022-2023 school year. The reason I say that is when you go onto the site on October 1st, there will be two FAFSAs available. One is for students who, maybe hadn't filled out a FAFSA for this current school year, or are transferring somewhere in January and now they need to file a FAFSA. Don't do that one. You want to do the 2022-2023 school year. You will also use your 2020 tax information to complete the FAFSA. So those are the taxes that you just filed a couple of months ago or are, still in process of filing. What FAFSA is going to use is something called prior year information. So they're not going to wait for this year's information. They're actually using like 2 years ago information. I know right then we were in the heart of the pandemic. I would love to say that was when we were in the pandemic, but we all know it's still going on. So what might happen is there may be some discrepancies between the situation you're in now and the situation that's reflected on your taxes. We'll talk about that in a minute and how to rectify that. One of the neatest parts of this process and easiest parts of this process is instead of having to copy information from your tax forms into the FAFSA, the Department of Ed and the IRS worked together to create what's called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. So when you start to fill out the FAFSA, you'll get to a certain point and it will ask you, do you want to pull this data directly from the IRS database? Absolutely say yes. You just basically need to put in your name, the last 4 of your social, and I think your zip code. It'll pull it on over and voila, you're done. It makes this process so much easier and so much cleaner. You're not going to transpose numbers. You're not going to put things in the wrong place. It'll just pull that information right in, and you're pretty much at that point done. Few things to keep in mind as you complete the FAFSA. You only need to complete the form once, regardless of how many schools to which your student is applying. You can list up to 10 schools that you want to receive that information. If for some reason your student is applying to more than 10 schools, you will need to just submit it once with the first 10. Once it goes through, you can log back in, take some of those schools out, add the additional schools, hit submit again, and that will make sure it gets to everybody. Remember, because you are filling out this form in October, chances are your student may not have heard back from the admission office yet. You don't need to wait for an admission decision before you complete the FAFSA. If your student has applied or is planning on applying for admission to a school, go ahead and get them on that form and listed, because it will make the back end of the process once they are admitted that much easier. You don't want to have to pop back in and put that in January. You will also need to create what's called a federal student aid ID, i.e. a login and a password, for both the student and the parent. So since this is probably the first time your student is completing a FAFSA, they will need to create one. Parents, if you've had another child already go through college or go into college, you can use that same parent, your own personal FSA ID for your part of this document. Basically, once you create that FSA ID, that login and password that identifies you as an entity, as a human, you're going to use that always when you're identifying you. So as a parent, you don't need to have 5 or 6 different logins if you have 5 or 6 different kids. You can do that now if you're like, hey, here's something we can do in the next 2 weeks before the FAFSA actually opens. Fantastic. You could do that now. You could also do it as you're creating your account on FAFSA.gov. So either way would be fine. One piece of advice that I definitely want to share is that make sure your name, your student's name, matches across everything you do when it comes to college. And so especially using the given name as it appears on a social security card is huge. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you have a son and his name is Michael, but he goes by Mickey, right? So when he applies to college, he puts Mickey Smith, but on his FAFSA, he puts Michael Smith. And even though a lot of the other information matches, sometimes computers don't match those things up, those databases. And then you call and you're like, hey, we filed our FAFSA right on October 1st. Why don't we have a package yet? And the financial aid office looks up and says, oh, we didn't realize Michael and Mickey were the same person. So just to make everything a little bit more streamlined, make sure that you are putting that same name across all documents. I have parents ask me all the time, do we have to provide our information? It's not me going to school, it's my student going to school. Well, the FAFSA assumes that students are dependent, that students are, at the grace of their parents, basically, that they are, being provided for by adults. And so students have to list parental information on the FAFSA unless they can answer yes to one of these questions. And they're all very specific. So it's not just, hey, we don't want to help out, so we're going to have our kid fill out the FAFSA by themselves. Doesn't work that way. Certainly, these are all very special situations. So take a look at those. And if those qualify for you and your family, then obviously, yes, they can be an independent student. But I would say 99% of the students who are applying for a first-time bachelor's degree probably, are going to be dependent students. The other question I get asked a ton is, hey, my husband and I, or my wife and I are divorced, whose information do we use on the FAFSA? Well, there's kind of a 3-step rule. It really has nothing to do with what your divorce decree says about who has to pay. It has everything to do with where that student resides. So if the parents are divorced, whichever parent has custodial responsibility is the parent whose information goes on the FAFSA. So where does that student live the majority of the year? If you say, wow, we've got kind of a 50-50 custody agreement, it's hard to tell, where that student lives most of the year, then you can take a step back and say, which parent is providing, that was tricky, greater support. And so maybe while student lives with dad, mom is paying, mom's carrying that student on her insurance and paying for the school fees and, whatever else. So that's where you can kind of, split hairs a little bit. The last piece of it is if the student lives with, let's say, mom, and mom is remarried, so students actually living with mom and stepdad, it's the household in which the student lives that the information gets used on the FAFSA. So it's mom and stepdad, in that situation. So again, if you've got specific questions about this, this is a great ISAC question. This is a great question for someone like me who works at the schools that your students are being admitted to. So you fill out this form, you pull that information over from the data retrieval tool, you click submit. What happens next? Well, the first thing is you'll get a confirmation. So a little screen will pop up and say, congratulations, you filed the FAFSA. It will also give you that SAI or student aid index immediately. So you'll see that right away. It's a good number to know as you're talking to colleges and universities. It will also show you the graduation rates of the schools to which you sent your FAFSA results. So again, it's that cost benefit analysis. If I'm thinking about going there, what is the likelihood that I'm going to graduate on time? And in the verbiage or in the formula, it's 5 years. What is the probability that I'll graduate in 5 years? That information is there. You will then get what's called a student aid report in about a week. And so the SAR, the student aid report, basically it's just a printout of here's the information that you put on the FAFSA. So just one more checks and balances to make sure that that information is correct. And then on the college side, we also get that information. Ours is called an ISER. So it's again, that same information that you receive, we receive. And again, the student may not have even applied yet or been admitted yet, but we've got it kind of sitting in our hopper, waiting, ready to go once that student is admitted. Here's another thing that I hear often. Families are like, well, we filed the FAFSA, so we're just waiting to see what we're going to get from FAFSA. There's going to be no money changing hands. The FAFSA is really just the vehicle through which your information gets transferred. So the money comes from the schools themselves. So it's not like you're going to get a financial aid award from the school and then FAFSA is going to say, oh, here's, another $12,000. Nope. The FAFSA is just that information gathering tool that the schools will use to create your financial aid package. Okay, so I've mentioned the financial aid package and the schools are doing this. So how does that all happen? Like, how do all the pieces fit together? Well, those are our friends in the financial aid office. And so they are the ones that will create this award. every school's got its own methodology. I would love to stand here, actually sit here and say, hey, here's the formula, here's how everything works. This is how you can estimate your own award for each school. But every school is a little different. Every school is looking at different things as they admit students. And so why might awards be different from school to school? Well, certainly the financial aid budget at each school is going to be different. There's going to be different amounts of dollars allocated for financial aid at each institution. May also have something to do with the selectivity of the school. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, your student is a pretty solid A-, B+ student, so has about a 3.6, 3.7 GPA, good human, good, they're going to make an impact on that campus. And so schools have offered some merit assistance. And so I'll give you the Xavier example. Every year somebody says, Julie, my student's got a 3.7, and we're really grateful for the fact that you gave him $23,000, but he's also applied to this other place and they're giving him almost 30. So what gives? I mean, do they want him more? I don't know. I think we're pretty excited about him too, but that's when you have to take a look at and say, where does my student fit in that applicant pool? At Xavier, a student with a 3.7 is pretty much the middle of our applicant pool, because our middle usually runs from about a 3.2 to a 4.0 weighted GPA. So with a 3.7, you're kind of like, this is our typical kid, right? So we're still going to be generous, but this is, who we generally get. At that other school where your student is receiving more money, maybe the middle is from a 2.8 to a 3.6. Now your student is in the upper quartile of those students who generally get admitted. Your student is setting the curve. So this is where you have to sit down as a family and say, what kind of an academic experience are we looking for? Do you want to be the one that's always going to get the A and always going to kind of set the benchmark in the class? Or do you want to be at a place where you're going to be surrounded by a lot of people who operate at your level, but there's also going to be people you're going to be challenged by? That's a question I can't answer for you. That's something that you need to answer for you as you go through this process. But that's why scholarships are different from school to school. And then finally, a school may say, wow, we would really love to have more students from Warren, or we would really love to have more men who want to be nurses or elementary education majors. We want to have more women in our STEM fields. So we are going to set up some scholarship dollars specifically for those students. Again, school to school, that's very different. So keep those things in mind as you're comparing financial aid package to financial aid package. I know it's really common, or it's pretty typical that as you have started your research and are looking at, what does college cost? I think a lot of people start with the big three, certainly tuition and fees, room and board. So where are you going to live? What are you going to eat? And then books and supplies. Obviously you need books and you need course materials and lab fees, all those kinds of things to actually go to class. When colleges create your award, though, they're adding some additional information in there. And these are, again, estimated by each college based on what they know to be true. One of those things is transportation. And so every college assumes that at some point during the year, you're going to want to get to that campus. You are also going to want to get home for a holiday, and then you are going to want to come back. That costs money. Even if you say, hey, but Julie, I'm starting at CLC, are they going to throw a transportation cost in there? Well, yes, you have to get there somehow, right? Whether you're driving your own car, whether you're taking a bus, whether you're Ubering every day, like there's going to be a transportation cost. Colleges will also budget in what they call personal and miscellaneous, or I like to call pizza money, right? What are the things you're going to do outside of the time that you're actually on campus? You know, how many sweatshirts do you want? Are you going to join a club team that has dues? Are you going to rush a fraternity or sorority? You know, you're going to need pencils. Whatever it is, they budget some of that money in there. So again, it increases your ability to get some of those financial aid dollars. So once they have the cost of college, then there's a little bit of a calculation, certainly, and that's what a financial aid office will call financial need. Financial need isn't how needy are you. It has nothing to do with your income. It's just a simple subtraction of, here's our total cost of attendance. So, you know, for this school, $60,000, that's tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, and then those estimations of transportation and pizza money. And then for this family, you know, with an SAI of 40, then they show $20,000 of need. For an SAI of 15, it's $45,000 of need. For an SAI of 5, it's $55,000 of need, which is not to say that the school is going to meet 100% of that need, but just to say, okay, now that we have what we cost and what your SAI is, we know, okay, this is how we're going to build that package of financial aid for you. So again, when you hear schools or folks like me talk about financial need, it's really just that simple math, cost of attendance minus SAI. So where does this money come from? I wish it came from the money tree. I would be out there right now, cutting it down. No, just shaking it, make sure it's still there. Well, we talked a little bit about scholarships already at the top of this. Grants are free money that you don't have to pay back. Loans, obviously, that is money that you'll have to pay back down the road, and then employment or work study. So let's break this down a little bit and talk about where these dollars can come from. Merit-based assistance is where a lot of schools start building their financial aid package, because merit aid is totally based on your students' achievements and their interests. It's, you know, we can use the information that they provide in their applications for admission to make a determination about how can we, you know, award you for things that you have already done, because merit-based aid does not take your family's income into consideration. You could earn $1, you could earn $1 million. It's all based on what your student has done in high school, whether that's academic, whether that's extracurricular, whether that's leadership. They have earned it or merited it in some way. The vast majority of merit-based assistance will come directly from those colleges and universities to which your student has been admitted. There are outside scholarships, whether those are local, regional, national, you know, and that's why the counselors at Warren do the scholarship workshops to help students really find those and apply for those. But I would say, you know, you're really not going to be like, oh, just raking it in from these other scholarships. It's a great way to bring down the cost and kind of, you know, fill in some of the gaps. But the vast majority of those dollars are going to come from the schools themselves. So that's one piece of it. That's the merit-based. The other piece is resource-based. So this is where that SAI, or that student aid index, really comes into play, because then the schools will shape that financial aid package and build in both gift aid, which is money that does not need to be repaid, as well as self-help aid, so loans and work study. So how does that all shake out? Well, there's 3 places where you get the free money, the gift aid. The first place is the Department of Education, and this would be in the form of a Pell Grant. The Pell Grant did go up about $1,500 this year, so that's some good news. So the max Pell Grant is about $83.70 per year. In addition to the Pell Grant, there's something called the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. That's a lot of letters. So the FSEOG, and that can award up to $4,000. This, however, is kind of a partnership between the DOE and the schools themselves. So while it could be up to $4,000, not all schools are going to have that as their high water mark. Some schools may say, you know, the most you can get from FSEOG is $500. So when you're comparing package to package, you may see some discrepancies there. That's not, oh, wait, I know there's extra money at this other school. I would definitely make a call at that point and say, hey, you're giving me $800. This other school is giving me $1,700. Can you up it? Chances are they probably cannot. If your student is planning on staying in Illinois for college, they can access the State of Illinois Monetary Award Program grant, or the MAP grant. And that could be if they're going to a private school like Augustana or DePaul, they're going to a public school like U of I or ISU or Eastern, or if they're going to a community college. So if they're going to stay and go to CLC for a year, they can earn this MAP grant. And the MAP grant taps out at about $54.96. So again, some great free money from the state. And then finally, colleges and universities themselves may have some additional institutional aid not tied to merit. So it has nothing to do with your students' grades and everything to do with your family's financial situation, to say, here's how we can help just a little bit more. And we know that, this isn't tied to scholarship. It's not tied to a GPA. It's just, we want to make sure that we can fill the gap a little bit as well. So that's the gift aid. Once you get past the gift aid, then we're looking at self-help aid. First and foremost would be a student loan. And just like with any other loan, you want to make sure that you are doing your homework and you understand where the money is coming from and when it needs to be paid back. I will say that every student who files a FAFSA is offered the opportunity to borrow up to $5,500 as a freshman through the Federal Direct Loan or Stafford Loan program. There's two types of direct loans. One is subsidized, the other is unsubsidized. So together, those can add up to $5,500. It can't be $5,500 each. And what does that mean? Well, subsidized means that while a student is in school, the interest is not accruing. Basically, it is subsidized by the government, that here's this money. Unsubsidized then, absolutely the opposite. While your student is in school, they are still accruing interest on that loan. I will tell you, I'm not a financial planner. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your money, but I think if you can swing it and you can take care of the interest while the student is in school, so that interest is accruing, there's no penalty for prepayment on these loans. It seems like a very small amount, maybe it's like $100 or $150 a quarter. It's still money that your student won't have to pay back in the long run. So go ahead and pitch that money at the student loan. You can do that. Right now, the rate is pretty competitive. It's about 3.73%. It is a fixed rate, and so those do change every year, but for that time period that you're borrowing the money, it will stay the same. And then when it says grace, that means students have a grace period of about 6 months from the time they graduate or from the time they drop from full-time enrollment, which for most students is 12 credits, before they have to start paying back those loans. So basically, they're just deferring those loan payments until after graduation. Those loans are in the student's name. They do not need a cosigner. It's just part of how the process works. There is an option through the federal government called a PLUS loan, which allows parents to borrow up to the total cost not covered by financial aid. So, again, let's say the total cost of attendance at a school is $60,000. You're receiving $40,000 in, grants, loans, work studies, scholarships, all of those kinds of things. So there's still $20,000 that you're expected to pay. Theoretically, you could borrow all $20,000 in a PLUS loan. There's a box on the PLUS loan that you can check that just says, yes, I want to borrow the balance. However, again, not a financial planner, but I think, to be reminded that the PLUS loan, this would just be for 1 year. And if you are planning to use the PLUS loan, then you're going to have to take a PLUS loan every year as your student progresses through college. So I'll be completely upfront, as we went into this process ourselves and we knew, hey, we can afford this much per month. Certainly there was a little bit more that we knew, hey, we're going to need some help with this. So we took a plus loan. We took a plus loan for not the whole balance, but just some of the balance, so that we could, again, leverage some future earnings, leverage, down the road a little bit. Again, no penalty for prepayment. So, when I win the lotto, I can just take care of it. Fingers crossed, right? So that's something that you're going to want to look at. The plus loan does require a credit check. So you do need to be credit worthy, and you can defer those payments until after the student graduates as well. Or you can start paying on it right away. And by right away, I mean the first time you would have to pay is usually February of your student's freshman year in college. So they want to wait till they've dispersed the second half of those funds for second semester, and then they will start sending you notices, so or your bill. So you've got that. Some families will ask, well, that's all well and good, but $5,500, while that's generous, is probably not going to cover our balance. Where else can a student find a loan? Well, know that if you want the loan to be in a student's name, they will need a credit-worthy cosigner. Students can't just walk into the bank and get those dollars. They will require a credit check from that cosigner, so know that that's part of it as well. I would say two places that our families generally use and really have liked are Sallie Mae and Discover Student Loans. So Discover, just like your Discover card, they do have a student loan arm as well. But I would also check with your own bank, with your credit union, with your credit card company. Any of those places will probably have some sort of student loan vehicle. So again, not a financial planner, not, telling you where to find these dollars, but just to let you know that they are out there. I don't want to belabor the loan point, but I think knowledge is power. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that for every $10,000 in debt, it results in a student loan payment of about $115 per month for 10 years. So, again, as you're looking at the big picture and not just saying, here's 1 year, but here's 4 years, if I'm borrowing this per year, this is about what I'm going to be paying out once I actually, get that job in the apartment and whatever else I need to get. So keeping that in mind. And if you really want to do a deep dive, if you're like, Julie, this is fascinating, tell me more about student debt. There's a great website or a great entity called the Institute for College Access and Success. And they do what they call the Project on Student Debt. So every year they do a quick survey of where students are once they graduate. And I like to share this information because I know that every year, it's either on social media or in the newspaper, on the news, somebody, some poor child talks about how they are $200,000 in debt because of, undergraduate work. That's the outlier. That's the flashy headline, right? The average indebtedness for the class of 2019, which is the most recent data that they have, was just a smidge under $29,000. So if you do the math, that's basically students who are borrowing the max amount through the federal loan programs and maybe just a little bit more. So it's not as dire as the media might have you to believe. And I also think another little piece that I love to share is that experts recommend that the student loan payments do not exceed 8% of the first year's income. So again, as you're going to visit schools and as you're researching, great question to ask is, okay, if I'm going to major in this and I want to do this job when I graduate, what's the average starting salary for students who graduate, with that field? And that's going to help you really, again, find that cost value analysis to really say, am I getting what I'm paying for? And then the last piece of self-help assistance is work study. And so families ask me about this all the time. Can my student get a job on campus? Absolutely. Some students are offered the opportunity or the eligibility to work as part of their financial aid package. This is not a line item that just subtracts, but certainly it says, hey, your student can earn up to X amount of dollars. And so I would say for work study positions, students are usually working 10 or 15 hours a week, maybe a little less, probably not a whole lot more. But just like any other employee on campus, they are paid on a set schedule. At Xavier, it's twice a month. So just like anybody else, they get a direct deposit into their account 2 times a month for the hours that they've worked. And then it's up to you as a family to decide where those dollars go. Do some of them, go to the bursar to help pay for your students' tuition? Do some of them, just stay in the students' piggy bank? Do they go into a savings account? Do they go, to buy pizza? Whatever it is, those dollars, again, it's not just an automatic credit to the account, it's into your student's bank account. So keep that in mind. And also too, even if your student is not awarded work study, they do still have an opportunity to work on campus in most cases. So that's, again, another great question to ask as you're visiting schools and as you're, kind of weighing out all of your options. What could I do if I found a job on campus? I said this at the beginning, I'm going to say it in a different way here. It's the ability to pay as determined by that FAFSA, not the willingness to pay, which determines a family's eligibility for financial aid. I have families a lot of times who say, this is what I want to pay. How are you going to get me there? Doesn't work that way. Certainly we want to assist as best we can. Can we always meet a family's budget? No, unfortunately. And I'm not just saying we, Xavier, I'm saying we in the royal we, colleges and universities. And so that's where you have to, again, go back to this whole idea of, is it worth, some extra dollars for what I'd be getting out of this equation? So keep that in mind. All right. So I talked, that was all kind of, nebulous, and here's the big picture, but I always love to give you a little something you can wrap your arms around a little bit more. So I chose a student, again, 3.6 GPA, good B+, A- student with a 1290 SAT, whose family's SAI is about 10,000. So pretty typical, right? So I went out. Every school that receives federal financial aid has to, by law, have something on their website called a net price calculator. Probably the easiest way to find those is just to Google net price calculator and then name of school, it'll pop up. And so I inputted this information to kind of see what could a student expect, if they looked at these 3 different schools. So I chose a private school. So, private schools, it doesn't matter if you're in state, out of state, everybody pays the same. I chose an out of state public. So for a student who lives in Illinois, but wants to go out of state to a public school. And then I chose an in-state public. So a student who wants to go to one of our 12 universities here in Illinois. So at the private school, that student received about $22,000 in merit aid. So that's scholarship. Good job. Nice work. And then an additional $3,800 in institutional aid. So this is just money from the school to say, hey, we're going to help you fill the gap a little bit. That student was eligible for that $5,500 in federal loan, as well as about $2,800, in work study eligibility. At the out-of-state public, they don't award merit dollars, but they do have institutional aid. Again, remember, enrollment priorities. They do have institutional aid available for out-of-state students. So the student's getting about $12,000 in institutional aid, that same $5,500 federal loan, and a little less work study eligibility, right around $2,000. And then at the in-state public, again, no merit money, but some institutional aid, so about $5,931 in institutional aid, and the loan, no work study eligibility. So a little bit different. And so the amount of aid that's awarded to the student from school to school varies pretty widely. But when you do the math, the actual out of pocket is pretty close. This is where you look at that and you're like, it's a $2,000 swing. And in the grand scheme of things, not too different. If you're curious, the in-state public is the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. The out-of-state public is the University of Kansas. And the private school is Xavier University. I'm no dummy. Of course I'm going to use this. So there you've got kind of what to expect. Again, not going to be the same at every school, but just to say, while the sticker price may look really different, the bottom line is really not. At the beginning, I talked a little bit about like, well, we're in a global pandemic and things have changed, and what may look to be true on the FAFSA is definitely not true. This is not the financial existence that we were living in 2020 is not what we're living in 2021. This would be considered a special circumstance. This isn't anything that you can go to FAFSA with and say, hey, but I'm making less money, or I'm not getting overtime, or whatever it might be. This is something, however, you can go to each school to which your student has applied and say, all right, I lost my job because of COVID, or, my hours were cut, or I just don't have the opportunity to do what I was doing. How can we make this adjustment? The schools themselves may ask you to, provide some documentation or fill out a form, but certainly they want to, again, do what's best by you and really make your reality part of the equation, and not just, here's the cold hard form. This is, there's no wiggle room. So I would say, when you are looking at, is this a special circumstance or not? The things that generally fall into that special circumstance category are things like, again, loss of or reduction of income, the death of a parent, unusual medical or dental expenses if you've got something way above and beyond, not just, oh, I had to get a crown. That's probably not going to move the needle very much. And some schools may consider, if you are paying elementary or secondary private school tuition. Some schools may not. So again, you want to ask the person that you're working with, either in the financial aid office or in the admission office, and we can help you out. When you're asking about these special circumstances, I always like to say, I can work some magic. I can't work some miracles. And so, got the pictures, right? There's a difference, like if it's, hey, is there anything more you can do? Certainly you can ask, but recognize that that's probably going to be, $1,000, maybe $2,000. It's not going to be, hey, we can pay your balance. And I think going into the ask, if you feel compelled to ask with those expectations, is probably going to be in everybody's best interest. Because a lot of times you'll ask and the school will say, I'm sorry, we've given you our best offer. This is what we can do for you. There's really not anything else. But it's never going to be, oh, we forgot a zero. No, that's not how it's going to work. So know the difference between magic and miracles. And find that balance between, what is it that we want? What is it that we need? And what is this going to cost? There's that balance that you have to find. So just a little checklist as you kind of go through the process. Again, October 1st, circle it in red on your calendar. That's when the FAFSA first becomes available. My senior families, again, make sure you're using the 22-23 FAFSA. After you're admitted, after your student is admitted, get those financial aid awards. Go and visit those campuses. I know most places are open for business again. Obviously, be safe, be healthy, but get on those campuses and get a sense of, is this the place for me? Particularly if you went already and visited or did a virtual visit and you thought, oh, I could see myself here. Get on that campus and get the vibe of it. Obviously, this is not just, here's the offer, see you later. Keep the lines of communication open as you go through so that we can help. I will never know if you have those questions, if you don't pop up. And even if it's, hey, this is the first time we've done this, can you just explain this award line by line? Absolutely. You're not going to get the gist of it just by looking at it and hoping that it's going to stick in your head by osmosis. So know that we are happy to walk you through and to point you in the direction of some additional resources, whatever it might be. And then finally, by May 1st of 2022, seniors, you need to, number one, pick a school. find that place that you're going to call home for the next 4 years. But the other side of that coin is tell the schools that you did not pick that you are not coming. That's going to help everybody, not just you, but me too, so that we know, hey, I can cross you off my list because you've picked someplace else, or I can be super excited because you have chosen my school. It's going to help kind of the communication flow as well. So be sure to do both. So what can you do now, particularly if you're not a senior? What does it seem like can happen? Well, if you're not a senior, obviously use those net price calculators. Starting next summer, do some scholarship searches, use the resources on Maya Learning for Warren so that you can see what those local scholarships are all about, and talk to your admission counselor. So talk to the people that do my job at the colleges and universities, talk to your school counselors at Warren, because we have, again, guided lots of families through this process and can kind of say, here are the things you need to be thinking about. Here are the things you should be doing. Here are your next steps. And if you've really enjoyed this and you're like, Julie, I just want to learn everything there is to know about financial aid. Well, do I have some websites for you? Studentaid.ed.gov, that is the Department of Ed's student aid site. All sorts of good information there, as well as finaid.org. Finaid is actually more for financial aid administrators. FAFSA.gov has got a great database of obviously information specifically related to completing the FAFSA, but also just general financial aid information. And as we said at the beginning, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or ISAC, your tax dollars help to fund ISAC. So use them as the resource that they are. Their website is great because it does provide some really good information specifically for who you are. So there's a tab for students, there's a tab for parents, there's a tab for school counselors, there's a tab for financial aid folks. So it's going to be in language that you understand. So definitely check that out. And then certainly if you have got other questions or need me to point you in some good directions, I'm always happy to help with those and to make sure that this part of the process is as seamless and painless as it possibly can be. So thanks for joining me today. I'm going to hand it back over to Ms. McGann, but good luck with your financial aid process and good luck finding that school that's going to be home for the next 4 years.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julie. We always appreciate your time and information, especially in the virtual environment. So for those of the families that weren't able to tune in to the live version on Thursday, September 16th, hopefully that will provide a whole plethora of information. I know I've learned a few things watching this again. So I think every time you rewatch it, it does help to solidify, maybe provide additional information. So as always, don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. We'll be happy to help. And students, this is our last big senior presentation. So enjoy your senior year, work hard, stay organized with your deadlines, and come and talk to us if you need any help. Have a great one.